G'day folks, my name is Billy Detmer. I am known around the place as a musician, and I've been playing music all my life, but prior to and in the middle of that and before, since and after, I spent a long time working in ambulances, either in the emergency or the non-emergency sector in Victoria as a clinical instructor. I've got a bucket load of qualifications and years and years and years of experience. I'm going to talk to this. I've got it written down here in the computer in front of me. I'm going to try and talk to you on the screen so that you can see here and be aware of what's going on. And I'll try and make this as fact-based as possible. Okay. Start with by saying I'd like to walk you through parts of my PTS journey about why I am the way I am. The way I am is deeply flawed, lonely, and reflective. Easy to anger, easily upset. I struggle with overeating, overdrinking, and not being good enough. My plan was to create a couple of spaces where you can join me as I discuss some of the relevant concerns which damaged me, are mostly unresolved, and may be like what has impacted you on your journey. This is the first, the initial foray into the space. We'll discuss the issues head on. The second will examine what I've done to address things, both good and bad. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a mental health condition that's caused by an extremely stressful or terrifying event, either being part of it or witnessing it. Symptoms may include flashbacks, nightmares, severe anxiety, and uncontrollable thoughts about the event. Over the years, I've had a couple of occasions where I was asked to talk about my issues, and I haven't done very well. I think that's because when I chose to talk about it, I wasn't ready, I wasn't prepared, and I wasn't able to. That little voice was there as well, saying they either won't understand or they'll be overwhelmed by my stories. There's always a risk of vicarious trauma. When I did go to counselling, I didn't find that support worker who could do more than just acknowledge, able to truly understand, give me the help I needed. I particularly remember being given an opportunity to discuss my history on the Breakthrough Ride, a motorcycle journey around Victoria to raise awareness of mental health in ambulance workers a few years ago. Instead of talking directly to these issues, I spoke way too fast and rambled on about the physical effect on my body rather than my mind. Each individual struggles within their own space, and everyone has specific causes. Not everyone has the same reaction to the same event. Someone at even a very confronting scene may look away at a crucial moment and not see what you see. This happened a number of times on the job where my partner would go to one car, I'd go to the other. They may come back and say, "You don't want to go there. She's gone or he's gone. It's messy." So I wouldn't have seen what they've seen, and vice versa. Before you go any further, I need to say that I'll be talking about particulars, not beating around the bush. If I tell you what it is that broke me, then you may feel better discussing what it is specifically which broke you. The one thing we need to agree on is this is not an opportunity for you to do the classic Aussie response of listening to interject, not listening to understand. I'm not comparing my notes with yours. I'm not looking for who's got the worst condition then. It's just hoping really for understanding from you and presenting my experiences as a clinical instructor with many years of knowledge, a bunch of qualifications to inform and to advise. Also, it's an effort to bring a little more observational guidance to counsellors and mental health professionals dealing with folk like me. Firstly, a couple of salient points relating to PTSD. Historically, PTSD spans the ages, recognised in early writings, but officially demarcated in 1980 after the Vietnam War, growing from terms like shell shock, World War I, and battle fatigue, World War II, to acknowledge trauma beyond combat, thanks to research and advocacy highlighting civilian trauma, rape trauma syndrome, and Holocaust survivors' accounts. Post-traumatic stress disorder has a multitude of facets. Every single survivor has very different symptoms. As to mine, I cry a lot. I go into shutdown, not talking to anyone. I get angry. I drink way too much. I'm hypervigilant, also not sleeping at all well. I smoked for years. I write songs and poetry. I eat way too fast. And there's much more. I have had occasion where to my face I have been told, "Mate, you can't have PTSD. You've never been to war." Let me be clear that this is post-traumatic stress, not post-war stress. This disease is not under the sole ownership of military personnel. It's not my intention to look at or compare my own demons to those of the battle-scarred war veterans, and it's not my intention to make comparisons to others in the same job. Every single person is different. Each case is different, and not every person who sees the same things will have the same reaction. So okay, let's talk about specifics. At some point in my ambulance career, I felt the early effects of damage related to cases. Flashbacks, highlights, moments. A bloke under a train in South Yarra, a female cyclist wrapped in the wheels of a semi on Beach Road, my first shooting in Carlton, a toddler choked on a piece of sausage, and the grandmother's grief, a knife fight in Toorak, the cot death, SIDS, of a child in Richmond, the collapse of a truck hydraulic tilt tray onto the head of a worker in Mentone, a mum who had just backed over her child. Every job dealt with and tucked away behind the other for later reference, each job further eroding my mental health but not showing at first. Like so many other new ambos, I was bulletproof to the situation, immune to the impacts. At dinner parties, I would discuss certain elements of my job, things I found exciting, stuff I thought was interesting, answering the often asked question, so what's the worst thing that you've seen then? My second wife, Elizabeth, would always say, you can't talk about those things. Didn't you see their faces? It's a very common question for emergency workers. What's the worst thing? I would often answer that, you don't want to know the worst thing, but almost everybody did. So, to cause. There are 3 very shocking scenes that play in my mind on repeat. I have attempted to talk with counsellors regarding these personal demons, but have never gotten far. The last shrink I spoke with had absolutely no idea of how to confront the topic, going around in circles about my mum, my dad, my relationship with family, my marriages, which of course all had their moments, but they were not the issue. Yes, sure, they added to it, but I tried to explain, but was told, oh, I specialise in music therapy. Perhaps you should bring a guitar in. Hello. I never went back. All right, here we go. The 3 events, not specifically in chronological order. I remember them vividly, where they were, the scenes, the smells. Firstly, we were called to a house in Montana South, a suburb east of Melbourne. It was late, it was dark, we arrived at a job transmitted as an attempted suicide. On arrival at the address, I saw several police wandering around the scene. Someone said, he's upstairs, it's not pretty. A youngish police officer was rushing downstairs and out the front door, vomiting as he went past me. I grinned, as I did, thinking, well, this one's obviously a bit of a novice, let's see what we have. What we had was a tattooed man on a queen-size bed with the top of his head blown off from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Unconscious with Cheyne-Stokes respirations. By definition, CSR is an abnormal breathing pattern with cycles of deep, fast breaths and slower, shallower breaths. You may have seen similar in your snoring partner, the more finite version present in the last phases of life. He was still at that point sort of alive. One eye followed me momentarily. His face was ballooned from the shot. May I just say here that no matter what you've seen in movies or on TV, people don't just collapse and die from one or even multiple bullet wounds. Not always. Most end up in hospital and repaired. But sure, some crash. It's the job of our ambulance paramedics to confirm death, assist in preserving life, or just patch him up, grab and run to the closest hospital where doctors and nurses provide most of the repair work. The stench was sickly, a heavy scent of gunpowder mixed with all the bodily smells, plus alcohol, fear, sweat and tobacco smoke. The scene, grisly. My partner muttered something and I suggested I move forward to see if there was anything to salvage, knowing full well that this was very much a terminal case, which just hadn't taken its last breaths yet. As I approached the bed, there was a guttural sort of growl, which I thought was from the victim. Then I noticed a small amount of movement from a black shadow beside the bed. I stopped, went still and very quiet. The terrifying eyes of a very large, very frightened German shepherd stared at me with anger, warning, back off. I ushered my mate ahead of me down the stairs and got out of that room as fast as I could, without running, keeping an eye on that poor animal and his soon-to-be deceased owner. Arriving downstairs with a trip, I yelled at the police, "What the fuck? There's a fucking killer dog up there. Why didn't you say something?" Or similar, laced with expletives. The answer was, we didn't know. We didn't see. We had no idea. An officer, composed, withdrew his weapon and slowly headed upstairs. A moment of pause, some muttering and a shot. So that's number one. I'll leave it there. The second was a middle-aged female pedestrian hit by a bus. The scene, a sunny afternoon at East Bentley, near the corner of Tucker and Centre Road outside St John's C of E, my old stomping ground from years before, where I attended a church youth group. We had been called to head across, stand by and take over a situation, allowing the crew who'd been there a while to finish their shift and go home. We had hours to go. They were already an hour into overtime. We stopped and chatted briefly with the other workers who were grumpy from standing around, busting a nut to get out of there and go home. The bus was stationed around on the corner with the damaged front. She's over there, I was told. There was a body under a sheet on the nature strip, some blood soaked through. I was given minimal detail and offered a paper with handover information, name, date of birth, not much more. We must have been on the scene 20 minutes or so. It was getting late in the afternoon, cooling down as photos and measurements were being taken by the attending police. We were just on standby. Typical sarcasm was being bantered about between us and the cops, the sick humour of emergency workers coming to the fore. A stiff breeze came up and lifted the sheet from the body of the victim as I watched. Someone gasped. I stared, unable to look away for a moment. A moment was all I needed. The woman on the ground had been split from the forehead to abdomen from the impact of the bus. She lay there, a scene from Jack the Ripper. I muttered some obscenity and quickly moved to cover her up. The damage done. Days later, I confronted the ambo who'd given me the shit handover and left the scene. He didn't understand my rage. I realised later, much later, that was his way of dealing. As mentioned earlier, we all handle trauma differently. His way was to feign indifference, or, as I was convinced later, he really didn't give a fuck. Some folk are like that, drifting through life wondering what all the fuss is about. Number three was David, a 9-year-old with cancer. This one was not that sudden shock, abusive, terrifying moment, but 6 months or more of contact, causing a longer lasting memory. David and his mum were going to Peter MacCallum Hospital in Melbourne, where the young guy would receive regular treatment. It had been going on for a little while before we crossed paths. The prognosis, not good. But mum and child were as positive as you could be back in those days before things really went downhill. Initially, everything externally looked normal for the young guy. I'd sit in the back on the jockey seat. Back then in ambulances, we had 2 beds side by side. Now they have 1. Up until the early 80s, some vehicles had 4 beds. David would be on one bed, his mum on the other, me behind there, and we'd chat. Over time, I would get to transport young David on a few occasions, and then, at their request, I would get them both again on the days I was working. He was going into hospital every week for quite a long time. The first time I ever sang to anyone in the back of the vehicle was to this little champion. We talked, the 3 of us, regarding how it was all going, and I watched the deterioration over time. There was a little wooden drum I gave to him, and he'd tap it as I sang. He laughed a little and cried a little, and we shared. Over the months he had an eye removed, and he'd often be sick after treatment, but nothing further could be done. In time, young David died, and I went to his funeral in uniform at the family request. The sadness fell on me like a thick fog and still affects me now when I think about him. So there you have it. 3 of the many cases I attended which impacted me in many ways hard to fathom. 3 mind worms that disturbed my sleep. As can be imagined by you, the listener, I could go on for hours with these jobs that affected my mental health. My sleepless nights, my drunken tears, but I am not doing this to be dramatic. Every emergency worker, police, fire, ambulance, SES, and these days every non-emergency patient transport worker around Australia and around the world has stories, often told without thinking of the impact. In my next post, I'll offer some insight as to what I've done to alleviate the stress and how or successful this has been for me. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you again shortly.